First, a word of gratitude to the BIC for hosting this event. And then a disclaimer, this might not be the mango book you expected to read. And I know this because this is not the mango book I set out to write. There's an expectation to what a mango book has to be. And that comes from the harshest 2 lines that have appeared in reviews on this book. They mention that the reviewer felt the need to say a book about the mango ought to be different. It should be something else. And then I just stopped at these 3 words, romance of the mango. Turns out there was a book titled Romance of the Mangoes. It was written in 2002. It was written by an art historian called Kusum Budhwar, and she put in a fair bit of hard labor into it. It's a collection of how the mango is depicted in the arts and culture in India through history. And yet this is not the most comprehensive book on the mango, although the strapline says that it is the complete book of the king of fruits. That has to go to a book called The Mango in Indian Life and Culture by P.T. Nair, who was otherwise known as Calcutta's barefoot historian. And this book began in 1966 for him when he was at his uncle's cremation, and a young man came and asked him why a barber was called to cut a seedling mango tree to cremate the dead among the Nairs. And he said, I don't know, but I will give you the answer to the question. Now these questions are meant to be forgotten. But Nair stayed with the question. He stayed with the question for 30 years. He collected all manner of information that he could put together, scraps from newspapers. He went through tomes looking for references to the mangoes. And he came out with this book in 1996. It's the most comprehensive monograph on the mango, has 2 volumes, 1,060 pages. And while he doesn't claim to be very comprehensive, it is quite an effort when you look at the 2 volumes. This is just, I just thought I'll put a picture of P.T. Nair here for you to. Now this is a book by 2 scientists from Rehman Khedar, Lucknow, the Central Institute of Subtropical Horticulture. And this book has just newspaper clippings related to the mango from all kinds of papers. Now the point of showing you these slides is there is no limit to the number of books on mangoes, right? It's the only fruit which has a writing season dedicated to it, not just a fruit season. This is a newsletter brought out by Sulabh India International, which is otherwise known for making toilets. And this is a special edition that they brought out on the mangoes. A magazine otherwise dedicated to toilets feels the compulsion to talk about mangoes. So when did I, among the books that I've been able to access, which is the oldest book, oldest monograph on the mango? 1897, Prabodh Chand Day. This doesn't mean references to the mango can't be found in ancient literature. There is the Brihadaranya, there is Varaha Mihir. From the ancient times, I mean, you find out that Alexander's soldiers had dysentery after eating a fruit that probably was the mango. So it's all over, but the first monograph dedicated to the mango is more than 100 years old. Turns out there is a book that came out 1 month after my book. We can't get enough of writing and reading about mangoes. This is the first article I wrote on it. This is from 2002. And this here is the article that resulted in the book. So you can see that there is a market for mangoes, and then there is a market to read and write on the mango. And the market is quite extensive, so extensive that despite so many books, publishers keep looking for new people. There is a journalist in Bangalore who has commissioned a book on mangoes, and she hasn't produced it yet. I hope she does. Now, this is how far the mango goes. Another example. This is the family tree of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. And in Gujarati, your family tree is actually called Kutumbno Ambo. You remember your family, you depict your family in the form of a mango tree. And every person, mostly sons, in the family tree are fruits. This is perhaps the largest mango tree recorded. This was in Chandigarh. It was called Chappar. It was called Chappar because that means the roof. And the tree was like a roof. You can see in the photograph, there's a man standing next to a branch which has come down to the floor. And I've got these photographs from Mohinder Singh Randhawa's book, History of Agriculture in India. And here is a reference from the same book. Mohinder Singh Randhawa is otherwise called Punjab's sixth river. He's the man who founded the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. And he points out that there is no religion in the world other than Buddhism, which is so deeply connected with trees. But actually, Buddhism has a deep connection with the mango. It's later on when Buddhism Buddhist monks traveled across South Asia and Southeast Asia, they carried mangoes as gifts. So the spread of mangoes from India and Buddhism actually goes together. But it's a lot more than that, and it goes back a long way. Because after attaining enlightenment, Buddha gave his first sermon at a place north of Varanasi, which is now called Sarnath. And he gave that sermon in a mango grove. And he spoke of the Dharma Chakra. That Dharma Chakra was later reinterpreted by Emperor Ashoka and turned into the emblem that decorates our, the wheel that decorates our national emblem as well as our national flag. And that's how deep the connections of the mango go. I haven't seen a comparable connection between a plant and another country anywhere. That connection, to understand that connection, we have to go a little beyond the fruit that we know, the fruit that we eat and crave. That connection has to do with a cultural reality of India. We've been a people of the forest. This here is a quote from an essay titled Religion of the Forest by Rabindranath Tagore. And when I come across this essay for the first time, I had no idea that it would go on to play a major role in changing the book I was going to write. Because this and several other things gave me a few glimpses about how deep our connection with the mango goes and how little we know about it. Because if the Buddha is, if Buddhism is deeply related to the mango, then the one deity who's deeply related to the mango, even deeper than the Buddha, is Kamadeva, the god of desire, the god of sex and love and procreation. So you've got Vairagya, detachment, and you've got Anurag, or attachment, both covered by the mango. The mango controls the polarities of our cultural existence. If you, I try to look into why the mango is so important to a lot of Buddha's teachings. And the only guess I can make is that he was talking about the bigger issues of human existence. And he needed basic metaphors to get his point across. And I guess the mango was a very powerful metaphor. In one place, he talks about the 4 types of people you're likely to meet. The person who looks mature but hasn't ripened. The person who has ripened but hasn't matured. The person who doesn't look ripe and doesn't look mature. And then the person who looks mature and has ripened. So you keep coming across these metaphors in Buddha's teachings. But the mango truly belongs to Kamadeva. Because the reason we feel this excitement and this compulsion to talk about the mango, to use it in our weddings, to use it to please people, is it was the symbol of perhaps the greatest and the longest festival in India, which was the Spring Festival. And this was called the Vasantutsav or Madanotsav. Madan is a name for Kamadeva. And Madan means, Mad means the same thing that it means in English, mad. So Kamadeva, it's his job to drive people mad. And he has 5 arrows. And his most important arrow is the mango flower. So the 2-month festival, Vasantutsav and Madanotsav, can only be found in old tracts. It was alive and kicking during the medieval times. You can see this in the writings of travelers like Ibn Battuta or court chroniclers who were traveling across India. And they keep talking about this time when everyone goes mad. There is a lot of communal eating, there is revelry, there is color, there is a lot of sexual licentiousness. It's all over, everyone's going bonkers. And the symbol of this festival was the mango flower. So the part of the mango that has been driving India mad is not its fruit, although that too is very attractive. The reason we go bonkers is the mango flower. And I've spoken to old people who have walked through or lived besides amrais or mango groves. And they said during mango season, there's this one artist and a scholar of ordinary artisanal communities, Ravindra Sharma, who described to me cycling through mango groves to meet master craftsmen. I said, if it was the spring season, I'd lose my way, I'd drop my bicycle, and I'd sit there somewhere on the floor holding my heads like I was a junkie. He said, that's how intoxicating the smell of mango flowers are. And I'm sure Bangalore has Alstonia scolaris trees, the devil's tree, Saptaparni it's called. It flowers in September or October in Delhi. And if you're in Delhi in that month, you go mad with the smell. So our craze for the mango has a lot to do with the flower. Do we even remember our festivals now? This is an ad in the Times of India, Delhi edition, on December 10th. And it is selling a holiday package to go and enjoy the Spring Festival in Japan. Hanami, Cherry Blossom Festival as it is known. This was a regional festival till 1870. And after the Meiji Restoration, the festival slowly turned into a major nationalist event. And now it is the greatest spring festival in the world. Billions of dollars exchange hands. Millions of tourists go to Japan for this. And we have people in India being sold holiday packages to enjoy a spring festival. In a country where, since the ancient times, a basic element of leisure was to go and enjoy mango flowers. That's how far we've become. That's how far we've come from what makes us. And realizing these things is what made me stop from the mango book I'd set out to write and end up writing a very different one, a much longer one, I must say. This is a map of mango flowering across the country. And you can see at the bottom left, along the Kerala coast, it's December 1st. And right at the top, near Meghalaya and Punjab, it's March the 1st. So mango flowering is actually spread out across 3 months. And each region has its own festivals. Now, a lot of the festivals I have been able to record come from North India, because I come from North India, which is why I was hoping that Kavya, the other journalist who's been commissioned a book on mangoes, comes for this event, but she was traveling. I hope she does the same job in finding out how South Indian festivals celebrated the mango. This is a map showing the mango's genetic diversity across India. And you can see that a big chunk of it is in northeastern India. And then the east, especially the Jharkhand, Odisha, Bengal tri-state area. And that has 2 regions. Then there is the other part, which is Chhattisgarh, Odisha, and Andhra. So what this tells you is the mango is largely either an eastern or a southern fruit in terms of its genetic diversity. But that, again, is only a part of the story. The North Indian plains are largely made of alluvial soil, so our ability to find out a lot of what was happening earlier is limited for the same reason. This here is a list of mango species recorded. And there are 69, and scientists have been arguing over another 10. So you can see what we call the Mangifera indica is somewhere there in the middle. About here. India has 8 other species of the mango, but just the island of Borneo has 33. So this shows that the mango has a Southeast Asian bias in terms of its genetic diversity, but that's not the full story. Now, coming back to Mangifera indica, just one species, it has 1,682 varieties have been recorded across the world. More than 1,000 varieties exist in India. This is just one species. Why is that so? Because Mangifera indica cannot self-pollinate. It cross-pollinates all the time. It's monozygous. It is highly heterozygous. So the character of the progeny is very different from that of the parents. It's like us. We can't say what our children will grow up to do. Most of the, Mangifera indica is monoembryonic. There is one seed, and that is a sexual seed. So there is a great amount of diversity in Mangifera indica, and it's much more diverse than any of the other mango species that we are familiar with. People love to talk about varieties of mango. So these are the 24 mango varieties that have any commercial value and that get talked about in our country. Some say it's just this 24. There are other scientific publications that mention 30. But it's between this number. These are the varieties that people generally have heard of, not otherwise. Now, I've seen every summer these maps are circulated, which have a list of, the map has which variety comes from there. And I've not come across one map that is correct. All the maps are wrong, and then they give a list of varieties. And they'll end up giving the names of the same variety from different regions, which is why you can't actually rely on the mango name, on a variety's name. So there's a variety that comes from a village called Baginapalle in Rayalaseema. That's called Benishan in Telangana. In coastal Andhra, they call it Banishan. In Maharashtra, they call it badam. In North India, they call it safeda. Although North India has a different safeda variety that comes from Lucknow. The Alfonso is called hapus in many places. In Andhra Pradesh, it's called badam. Maharashtra calls their mango badam. There is a variety that is grown in the district of Malda in northern West Bengal. They call it langda. The same variety, you travel east about 250 kilometers, and it's called Malda. In Malda, they call it langda. You cross the Ganga, go to North Bihar, it's called Kapuria. You go further west, you get to Banaras, and it's called langda again. I've seen several lists, say Bombay Green and Siroli and Bombaya and Bombay. They're the same mango, same cultivar. And then there are varieties that are called Gidwala, because vultures used to rest on that tree. There is Haramzada, I don't think I need to explain. There is Kadua, because it looks like a pumpkin. There is Karela, for the same reason. There is Hilsa Peti. This is a variety that has gone extinct. Its flesh used to resemble the pink flesh that comes out of the Hilsa fish. And of course, there's Hosnara, which is named after a famous actress from the 30s in Bombay films. So here's a trick to mango names. You can take, may I ask your name, sir? Suresh. So if he likes a particular mango, we can call it Suresh Khas or Suresh Pasand. Right? I've come across Rani Pasand, Raja Pasand, Wazir Pasand. BIC Pasand can be a variety. Bangalore Pasand. Actually, Bangalora, Totapuri is called Bangalora. Why in Andhra? Because that variety didn't have a market till the pulp industry in Bangalore began to buy that in the mandis of Andhra. So they began to call it Bangalora. So don't trust any mango names, variety names is what I'm trying to say here. Now, how do the varieties come about? This is a very learned man I was fortunate enough to meet in Lucknow, Khan Muhammad Atif, and he described many beautiful things and then said, the mango is not just a fruit, it is a culture. And here, we take a little bit of a detour, because what we call varieties don't have a long history in India. They owe to Mughal gardening expertise and the expertise of Jesuit priests in Goa and Bombay and the West Coast. Because mango, for some reason, was not grafted in India. Although grafting techniques have been mentioned in ancient texts. Some of the oldest references to grafting, both skin and plants, come from India and China. But we didn't graft the mango. So the fine mangoes come from a different culture. It comes from the culture of Central Asia. Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, that region lies between two ancient gardening superhouses. There is Iran to the west, and there is China to the east. So this region has been it's been called a horticultural superhighway. It lies along a horticultural superhighway. So they have a long culture of producing fine fruits for consumption. Whereas in India, the fruit was just one of the delights that the mango brought to people. So this tells you that there are two separate cultures of the mango. There is the culture of the grove or amrais, and then there is the culture of the bagicha or the orchard. Where does the mango come from? The oldest modern botanist to address himself to this question was Joseph Hooker, the naturalist and a friend of Charles Darwin. And he hypothesized that the mango came from Southeast Asia. Since then, it has been a long drawn sort of shuttlecock game between Southeast Asia or Northeastern India. But then, in the late 80s, a scientist found a fossil of the mango that dated to that found it in sediment dated to 59 to 56 million years ago. And at that time, India was an island south of the equator. This map is from the PETM, which is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maxima. This is 55 million years ago. So the oldest fossil of the mango is from a time when India was south of the equator. So the mango does belong to India, from the best evidence available. We just need to ask, what is India and do we belong there? This here's the, I just thought you'd like to see a photograph of that same fossil, which is about 60 million years old, and which is the oldest fossil of the mango. And outside of the Indian tectonic plate, mango fossils have not been found that are older than 23 million years ago, which is when there was a land connection between the Indian plate and the Asian plate. Before that, I mean, the collision is dated to about 50 million years ago, but it took a long time for the water to get, for the Tethys Sea to get drained out between India and Asia, and for the connection to happen. So I guess that's it. That's just to give you a few vignettes of what doing this book helped me find out. And we should switch to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks to the BIC for having us. And as you can see, it's a bit of an onerous task to follow up on the large range of ideas that Sopan has touched about. In fact, those of you who know him know that every conversation with Sopan is of this kind, right? Where you are sort of ranging over many things effortlessly, and you have to spend a lot of time just, and mental energy just keeping track of what is it that we are looking at. So this book, firstly, congratulations in a formal sense. I heard about it about 10 years ago from his mentor, the late Shri Anupam Mishra. And I've been waiting for a while for this to appear. But I can see now why it took a while for a volume of this kind to actually appear. Because while Sopan is correct in acknowledging the prior art, if you will, in terms of the volumes of, say, Kusum Budhwar or Thankapan Nair Saab. There's also, for example, S.R. Ganguly's monograph on the mango, and there are a number of sort of scientific monographs that are available. But I think I can say with confidence, this is an unusual book. This is probably the only one of its kind that I'm aware of, which actually takes a rather comprehensive look at what is the mango about. And it is not, as he's tried to tell us, it's not, we all love the mango. We are all waiting for them to arrive in the market and we'll all relish it. And I remember the end of the mango season, every year, I have this tinge of sadness and nostalgia that that's going to be the last one I'm going to have this season. Although I know very well that 9 months down the line, I can have as many as I wish. But that's the nature of our affinity with the fruit. And certainly it is the fruit of India. So Sopan has divided his book into 3 parts. The parts are called Fruit of India, Fruit of the Wilderness, and Fruit of the Senses, right? But the question that I want you to address, or rather what I want you to share with us, is that this is a book which also hides. There's a little bit of a trick that he's played there. He tells you a lot about many things. You've seen a sampler of those ideas here. He's also spent a lot of time traveling across the country and looking at things and relishing mangoes. And many of us, if you read it, you will feel a tinge of jealousy that he's been able to sample some of the best fare that's available. But what it does is it doesn't tell us about the grind that is involved in actually asking questions, ferreting out and understanding, because the sense that Sopan is giving us in this book is not something that can just merely be inferred from, say, textual material alone or talking to people alone, right? He sort of mentioned a little bit about that this is not the book that he had originally set out to write, but I want you to tell us how you took a mass of thin facts. We all have a sense of what the mango is, but I look at it as a an agglomeration of facts that are thin. And now to put it together into a meaningful narrative, how did you go about doing that? How did you arrive at the structure that you have?
Thanks, Venu. There is something called, I do talk about it in the book, there's something called the mango writing season. And that has, the mangoes like, in Hindi we hear about Bharat ek krishi pradhan desh hai, or the cow is a useful animal. Those essays that we have to write in school. The mango is quite like that, because everybody that you speak to, right? The mango, are? And I met at least 20 people, upwards of that, who are planning their own book on the mango. Now, there is nothing else like this. And because I used to be an agriculture reporter, I am familiar with the countryside, and I understand agriculture markets a little bit. Nobody understands agriculture markets in India. I promise you that. So it takes, so you assume that this is the book you have to write. You have certain ideas of, the mango writing season. There are kings and there are wonderful varieties. And then if you come from a certain kind of feature writing, into which I have wandered in the past, you do write about the finesse of the food, the taste and whatnot.
The connoisseur.
Exactly, and that's it. Now, I've heard these two things mentioned by people, that I'm a food connoisseur and I'm somebody obsessed with the mango. I wish to deny both allegations. I am not obsessed with the mangoes. It's not even my favorite fruit. But it is,
That might affect the sales of your book, right? I mean, you better watch out.
I do non-fiction, so I can't escape that. But after spending about a year and a half reporting and spending all the money that I was given for this, I realized that I didn't want to write whatever I had. It was just a repetition of what others were saying. And people like Nair and Budwar have done a great job of several aspects of the mango. So why should I try to reinvent the wheel? But I was also getting a sense, having worked on agriculture and environment earlier, I was getting a sense of the larger themes there that had not been tapped by anybody else. For all the number of books on the mango, I realized that nobody had actually joined the dots. So I've been trained to do those kind of things. That's been my journalism. So I decided that I was going to do that, whatever the cost. So this book has actually cost me a lot. It's not just the time. Travel is very expensive. Most people write about the orchards that they know in their region. I've had to go from orchard to orchard in parts of the country where I don't speak the language, I don't know anybody, and I spend the entire day in the summer heat with nothing to show for my efforts. So there have been many days like that. But the point is, what you find out after that is so beautiful that it takes away the weariness and it makes you want to plot further.
Yeah, so that's essentially the sense that I got, because if you read, there is a fair chunk of the travel narrative, and anyone who has ever tried to travel asking questions will recognize that there's a hard grind there, and there are more misses than hits, right? But see, I found the manner in which the mango is illustrated on the cover quite illuminating, because it shows the fruit, but also it shows the other elements that you were talking about, right? The leaves, which and the inflorescence, what you talked about in the Madanotsav context. And I think it encapsulates in a very nice, wholesome sense the nature of what this book is to some extent about, as far as a single illustration can. So you mentioned these deep roots, deep cultural roots of the mango, going back to the Buddha himself. And for example, there are a number of early and iconic depictions of the Buddha as in the form of a mango, right? I mean, and of course there are the associations of the forest and so forth. Moving forward, to, let's say, the colonial time, it's very interesting that if you look at the floral motif on textiles, the so-called butte or the paisley as the Brits would call it, now that's something that comes from Iran and the Persian context. But in India, in most Indian languages, you would find it on, on the borderlines of saris or bed sheets. It's recognized as the mango, right? And it's the mango motif is what it has become. And so there is something that is very deeply embedded in our psyche in terms of the mango. But going back to the really deep history origins of the mango, what I find striking is that, you see, there's been this Vavilovian idea of centers of origin where you look at diversity of variety, and then you essentially conjecture largely that that's also probably the site of the origin or the center of origin. You seem to suggest with reasonable evidence that that's not necessarily the case with the mango.
Nikolai Vavilov was a great man. He did incredible work in botany about 80 to 90 years ago. And he left us with this idea that a plant is likely to have originated in a place which has the largest number of wild relations, or land races as they are called. Now, in the case of the mango, Southeast Asia has, just Borneo has 33 species of the mango, whereas mainland India has 4, and the Andamans, which is quite close to Southeast Asia, has another 5. So there are 9 species of the mango in India. So one would assume that it comes from there. But then this led to a delightful but complex debate among paleobotanists about what has come from where. And the reason, we can get into the evidence, but that'll take a long time. It's got to do with how the megafossil guys see things and how the pollen fossil guys see things. But there is an Indonesian mango expert called Kostemans. And the list of species that I showed to you, he was the first one to compile that list. And he has suggested most of the forests in Southeast Asia come from this one family that is called Dipterocarpacea, which has sal, right? 2-winged fruit. 80% of the forests in Southeast Asia come from that one family. And it was assumed that that family comes from Southeast Asia. But in recent years, genomics has shown us that that family is deeply related to another family that is found only on Madagascar. Which means that it is very likely that Dipterocarpacea has a Gondwana origin. It traveled north on the Indian plate and then spread all over Asia. And because the conditions in Southeast Asia were so rich, it diversified in a way that it seems like it has come from there. So Kostemans has a wonderful line in this saying, if Dipterocarpacea is of Gondwana origin, then we may as well say Anacardiacea is of Gondwana origin. Anacardiacea is the family in which the mango comes. It's called the cashew family. It has also got pistachios in it and poison ivy. So it's such a complex story. And now there are 3 theories that it came from Gondwana to Asia. Then another theory says that it spread out from Southeast Asia. And there's a third theory that says that there was a string of stepping stone islands which allowed for plants and animals to travel from Asia to Gondwana land masses. So yeah, it does. Vavilov was a great man. He did very good work with the evidence available at that time. But now we have genomics and whatnot.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's sort of the interesting dimension that we are still figuring out many of these questions, right? And there are a number of other things to do with the specific nature of the biology of the mango, which we'll come to. But I want you to dwell a little bit more on the mango in its, what you may call its natural setting. Because we, as urban residents, most of us are familiar with the mango that's available for sale in the market. And that's largely what it is. But you've sort of argued rather forcefully in this volume that we have to recognize that there is a certain larger ecosystem, but also a social setting in which the mango tree takes on big significance in terms of, say, food security, what you call amrais in the north, which I presume, for lack of a better word, would be something like commons, right? I mean,
Mango groves.
yeah, the groves, which are also accessible to people at large. So tell us a little bit more about the nature of the relationship that we have had, which has now been sundered and kind of forgotten largely, with the tree itself.
I'll give you 3 quick examples. I was looking at the trees that produce the best langda mangoes in Banaras in front of the registration office of the Banaras Hindu University. Right? They're grand trees. And suddenly there was a storm. So langda is known to fall very easily. In fact, in Banaras, they say if somebody has poor nerves, they'll say langde ki tarah kaamp raha hai. So some of the fruits fell down, and the fruit was mature. It was just being harvested at that time. So I watched as professors and students and officials at the university abandoned their vehicles and ran after the fruit like they'd never seen it before. So I asked the young man who'd taken the contract, saying, I asked him, I mean, are they taking away produce that you bought? And he said, nobody can touch anybody who's collecting fruit from the ground. That's a culture of the grove. Then in Delhi, a mango trader got into an argument with somebody while his produce was being offloaded from a vehicle. And suddenly people looted the crates. Somebody took videos of it. It became a story. He lost produce worth more than 2 lakh rupees. Then, when the story was published, people sent him lakhs in compensation. Unknown people. He lost his money, let's send him some money. Can you imagine this happening for the chiku? Can you imagine this happening for oranges? Right? And then the last one, which doesn't have to do with the mango, has to do with the apple. My father was traveling, my father was a journalist. He was traveling with a friend through rural Kashmir. And it was harvest season for apples. And he told his friend that let's get a few apples. And the friend had the taxi stopped. And he said, I'll go and look for the gardener. So my father said, no. Fruit obtained by permission doesn't taste that sweet. And as soon as they went and got themselves an apple each, the gardener landed up. Now here is he looking at 2 70-year-old men, munching on his produce without a say-so. So my father's friend told him that, this is what he said. He burst out laughing. And then he got a basket and he collected the best pieces that he had and he gave it to them as a gift. There's something about fruits that changes the game. We look at fruits and flowers. We use them to seduce mates. Right? We use them to compare our sex organs. I also realized while I was going through the material on primates and how primates are shaped by trees, when you become successful in the corporate world, you get a corner office atop a skyscraper and you look down on other people. That's exactly how primates look from the trees. Right? So our ideas of there's so many things that are still shaped by the natural world, but we don't recognize it as that because we like to see ourselves as cultured, sophisticated, rational people. But the science actually is veering towards saying that the entire primate order is designed by trees that produce fleshy fruits. We have designed them and they have designed us.
So just to follow up on other dimensions of the story, I mean, when I read the draft of Sopan's book, one of the ideas that struck me is a phrase he used in the text, which I was hoping would be the title, which is what we have chosen for today, Nature's Wild Child, right? It points to the origins of the mango and also the rather untamed nature of what the biology of the mango is, and as a result, the fruit that we relish. So in particular, there is this whole story that he develops in terms of the monodiploid versus polydiploidy of the mango. And then there is the whole question of this whole issue of seedling mangoes and grafting. What I find very striking, there's a sentence in your book which says, till independence in India, most trees in the orchards were grown from seeds. But now I would think the story is mostly of the grafted versions, right? And this reminds me that this is a scenario that we've seen in many other contexts. Cotton, for example, right? I mean, we've had short staple, what are called desi varieties, largely dominating cotton production in India till independence and then partition, because there was a big impact of partition on cotton production. But then over a period of time, it's largely been replaced by what's so-called American cotton. And now, of course, we have the GMO varieties, which are dominant. But tell us a little bit more about this business of grafting and what it means for the type of mango that you can get in a commercial setting, right? After all, it's a fruit that is being sold in the market. It's being grown for the market. And the challenge is, firstly, in tracing this whole question of where does grafting of the mango in India originate, but also what it implies for the larger question of the viability of the mango as a produce that is stable, that is profitable for the farmer or the owner. And then we'll come to that question of who actually produces the mango after that.
So the common mango is, it has one seed, and that seed is a sexual seed. So it's a fertilized seed. It's getting its genes from two parents. Now, at the time of fertilization, in the mango, it's very uncertain what traits will align in what way. In fact, one study shows that on the mango's genome, at one point, there are 24 alleles. That means you're going on Google Maps and you're looking at what two directions to take. You get to a point and there are 24 options. Right? Now, that's not all. The mango is self-incompatible. It cannot fertilize, the hermaphrodite flowers cannot fertilize themselves. So it has to cross-pollinate, which means that the mango hasn't been able to hit on a stable form of reproduction along its evolution. Now, this comes out in plants called facultative reproducers, that they will switch to sexual reproduction in times of environmental crises. But if conditions are stable, they produce asexually. Because you don't change a winning team. Right? But if conditions change, then you need to try out new players in your team. So sexual reproduction is nature's way of changing up. And the mango compulsorily has to change up. Which means if you like a mango, you plant its seed. The tree that comes out, the fruit might be similar to what you ate, or it could be different. Nobody can say. So the only way to get the same fruit is to get tissue from that plant and graft it on top of a sapling. Now this is cloning, and grafting is a form of cloning. So all the varietal mangoes that you see, they're coming from clones. They grow a seedling and then they put a graft on top. Now, this is so extensive that in parts of India, a mango orchard is called kalam. And kalam is an Arabic word. It's used for sideburns, for pens, but also for a graft. So what you do when you graft is you get the clone of the parent. So you get the exact same fruit. Now this technique was not tried on mangoes in India, although grafting references are aplenty in India. So this began to get done when Jesuit priests began their horticulture experiments in Goa. Because they were looking for a marketable product for income for their orders. So Christ also comes into the mango picture now. Right, we haven't spared Buddha, we haven't spared Kamadev, we haven't spared Krishna. So let's bring in Jesus Christ also. And it becomes a very powerful product for Jesuit priests especially. So, and the history of how the grafting techniques spread out from the West Coast across the country is not known. A good historian needs to work on this, and I'm not that historian. But there is evidence, historians have shown, that till 250 years ago, most of the orchards in North India was grown from seed, which means people were willing to experiment. It is not the one taste that you had that you keep craving. You are willing to try something new. Because a mango tries something new every time.
Yeah, but that seems, I suppose, with contemporary taste profiles, that's probably a risky adventure for anyone to be
Very
involved
much.
in, right? And I find in that context, one of my favorite stories, which I thought I'll sneak in, is the success of the Mallika variety in Karnataka, right? So here is again a graft variety, which is a cross between the Neelam and the Sherry. The Neelam is generally not considered amongst the finest of varieties out there, but it has a number of interesting traits which lends itself to this kind of an exercise. Tell us a little bit about the nature of the Mallika and how it came about in Ramnath Singh's work, right?
Okay, so of all the 1,000-odd varieties known in India, there are only 2 varieties that bear flowers regularly. The tree will bear flowers and fruits every year. And they are both from South India. There's Neelam and there is Totapuri. You can't use Totapuri in any kind of crossbreeding experiments because Totapuri dominates. You breed it with anything else, what you get is Totapuri. Neelam, on the other hand, is more pliable and it's a regular bearer. So all manner of breeding experiments across the country have used Neelam. And they use Neelam both as the mother and as the father. So the first successful variety that to come out of the ICAR research programs was in 1972, and it was called Amrapali, which has Neelam as the father and the Sherry as the mother. It's a fine mango, but it still is not very tameable. 6 years after that, in 1978, ICAR released Mallika. Mallika has Neelam as the mother and the Sherry as the father. And they managed to find mango experiments are so tortured, you don't want to do that. If you have children, tell them to not get into mango research. If they are interested in botany, I'll point them towards other things. It takes years to do like a basic test. So they managed to find one cultivar that had a desirable taste and was stable. And that turned out to be Mallika. It was released in 1978 from Delhi. And it became very popular in Karnataka. Amrapali is very popular only in Odisha. So it's, you don't know what's going to take where. This was meant to be North India. Because North Indian trees have a problem. They grow very tall. And they don't produce regularly. South Indian trees, mango trees, tend to be shorter and more manageable. I mean, the hypothesis is that the light is coming from the top. Whereas in North India, the light is more horizontal. So the trees try to get very tall. North Indian trees don't do well in India, in South India. South Indian trees do very well in North India. Likewise, there's a difference in change. South Indian mangoes, the best mangoes, are not very sweet. The taste profile is more complex. Whereas North Indians, they look down upon all mangoes that aren't sweet. And my guess is this is the influence of Iran. Iranian food has a lot of very sweet items. From where we get jalebi, from where we get halwa, from where we get gulab jamun. Right? So it's that taste profile has come from Iran to North India, but it hasn't traveled to South. So South India still has the older Indian taste for a complex, a little bit of acid, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of this, a little bit. The finest South Indian mangoes are so fragrant. It's unbelievable. I've had the smell of that mango in my sweat 3 days after I've eaten it. I could have smelled it in my urine. That is how flavorful the best South Indian mangoes are. So yeah, I mean, South India doesn't make enough of a noise about it.
Well, thanks for chiming in on that. And I suppose I'm hoping for the other volume that you mentioned is in the works, which will probably cover more of this territory. So you talked about the challenges of creating varieties which are stable with desirable traits and stuff. But and you have been using this phrase risk and desire, which sort of are the two poles that capture the range of experiences that are associated with the mango. Before we open up, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about like you have a chapter where you say, chapter 12, which says, who grows your mango, right? So tell us a little bit about who grows our mango and what does it mean to take on the challenge of growing mangoes for the market, and what does it mean when it ends up on our dining table, right? I mean, that entire chain, there are a number of questions that are involved. And maybe you can also talk about the impact of land ownership in that context, because that has a very crucial role in shaping the kind of mango that we are able to get.
So the mango consumed in India since the ancient times was mostly grown on common lands, and it was available to everybody. It's with the coming of the Mughals and the Portuguese that a finer fruit comes about. And it's only the rich who can afford that finer fruit. So they had Mughal revenue programs, had revenue exemptions for people who committed their land to orchards to grow fine fruit. If you grew fine fruit, you didn't have to pay revenue. It was a way to encourage. But under the Mughal rule, the commons, the mango groves and amrais, were left unmolested. So people still had their mangoes. This changes with the coming of the British, who took on a very different kind of revenue system. They adopted zamindari. So they weren't interested in the condition of the people, they just wanted their money. Which meant that there are revenue accounts of zamindars just cutting amrais one after the others. There are British officers complaining about their own zamindars who are chopping amrais. There's my friend Ajay Singh here from Varanasi. Varanasi has a famous parikrama around the city. And all along that parikrama were mango groves earlier. You can't see one. They've all been cut down. And what has happened is that a new kind of mango orchard has come about. After zamindari was abolished in the 50s, families that wanted to retain land and not lose it in the land ceiling began to commit their land to orchards, because the land ceiling was lax for orchards as compared to the land ceiling for irrigated lands. So suddenly you had a lot of orchards coming up. And it's only after the independence that we've lost all our amrais, and orchards have come up where landowners do not visit their land. I've spent a fair amount of time on this. I don't have data. I'll talk from impression. About 70 to 85% of all our orchards are owned by absentee landlords who don't visit them, who get an annual payment from a contractor who grows the mango. The contractor is desperate, so he's going to use all manner of toxic chemicals, spurious chemicals. And there is a line in the book that the mango contractor, the contractor is the arch villain of India's mango badlands. He's also the arch victim. So while we wax on about, the Shawkeens and their love for great mangoes, the mango sector in India is sick, and it is run with total indifference. The orchards are owned by families and people who have no interest in that land.
So that's a rather somber note to take a pause on. But before we open up for Sopan to interact with the audience, I just thought that I'll point that he's talking about so many of these experiences and understanding of what the history and deep cultural roots are. But there's also an occasional glimpse of wry humor, and that's also in the nature of, if you interact with him, you'll see. So for example, there's one place in the book he says, in biology, you're not merely what you eat, you're also what eats you, right? And then there is another funny line which I thought was, which tells you a little bit about the challenges that are out there in the field. He says, while I walked about tasting mangoes, mosquitoes raised on an organic diet made a feast of me, right? So, that sort of gives you a sense of the kind of approach that he has taken. So he's looking at these really large, significant questions which have deep, the challenges in actually representing them. And he does it not in a didactic sense, but in terms of as a more like a storyteller and a journalist. Maybe this is a good time for us to open it up for questions and comments.
Hello. Thank you for this beautiful conversation. My mother grew up in Maharashtra and my father in Andhra Pradesh, and we are Gujaratis. So Badami is a very obscure variety for me. And I'm very curious about its etymology because people from different states use the same word for different varieties. So where does the word come from?
I can venture a guess. Because fine horticultural skills come into India from Afghanistan and Iran. They are the gardening cultures. We are the forest cultures. Products that came from Afghanistan had a certain reputation. I mean, there are references in the book. There are descriptions of Mughal emperors waiting for fruits from Central Asia. I'm not even getting to Babur, who was nuts about fruit. Right? It's surprising how he managed to get into any kind of a military adventure. He was just obsessed with fruits. Now that is a person obsessed with fruits, not me. So it became a generic name for anything that has quality. Because those horticultural practices they're like, have you observed that people, I mean, you're perhaps too young to have ridden tongas in Indian cities. Horse carts. Most of them were Afghan. So horses and tongas and horticultural practices moved along with Afghan migrations in India. And it's very common. I've got this story, it's there in the book. It came from a neighbor of mine who described an experience he had in mid-1940s. His uncle was very active among Hindutva political parties. Right? He was a very staunch Hindutva follower. And he had a cow in his farm which had delivered a male calf. So a lot of people used to go to owners and ask for the calf because it produced bullocks. So a lot of people came to him and went on asking, कि लाला ये बछड़ा हमको दे दो. So he used to say, हाँ देखते हैं. And then he told this man who told me the story, he said, मैं इनको दूंगा क्या? मैं अपने पठानों को दूंगा? Why will I give them the calf? I'll give it to my Pathans. They look after animals so well. So I've seen nurseries, old nurseries in India, established by kings, by princes. They'd especially ask for Afghan horticulturists. See, Afghanistan was a horticulture superpower till the Soviet occupation and then the Civil War. It's not, Afghanistan is not very suited for agriculture of most types because it has many extremes. The highest temperature recorded there is 45 degrees Celsius. The lowest recorded is minus 54 degrees Celsius. So it's not good for growing crops, but it's very good for horticulture. So, and badam come from there. So badami is like, oh, it's very good. It's an association of quality. This is my best guess.
I suppose it's far easier for us to figure out where kesar comes from, right? I mean, given that you mentioned Gujarat. Yeah, we'll move on to someone else.
Hi, sir. This is Vinod here. I have 3 questions. One is, I have seen some of the seeds from the past have not been sown. So because of the commercial projects, so they go for only Alphonse or Badami or something. So if you see very long years, where do you find out any in your research saying that some seeds are lost because of something else?
Many seeds are lost.
So how do you come back? How do you take it back? That is it anything where we can do? As you said, there is a lot of research going on to get one seed.
Okay, thank you for a very good question, Vinod. See it like this. Please sit.
Yeah.
How did we get so many varieties of the mango? See, all mango varieties are called chance seedlings. somebody found out that this tree gives good fruit. So then the seeds are planted. Earlier, people were willing to play a waiting game. You had a child in your family, you planted a mango tree. Somebody died, you planted 2 more mango trees. Right? Mango is Buddha, mango is Kamdev. Every occasion means 1 more mango tree. Emperor Ashoka wants to do his own propaganda, tell people that I've done things for the welfare of my people. I planted a mango grove. Which is why was mango so important? Because it was infrastructure. In my family, I still have relations who've gone for wedding parties, barat, which comes from the Sanskrit varayatra. Barats typically stayed in the mango grove. Weddings used to happen in the mango grove. Picnics used to happen in the mango grove. Everything was mango groves. I was in Vardha 2 weeks ago, and I was at Vinoba's ashram in Pavanar. And somebody asked me about what have you been doing recently. They just asked, some people gathered around and said, tell us what you've been doing. So I said, there's this book which has come out. And I mentioned the Amrai. They just stopped and said, when we were children, we used to play in the Amrai across the river. And it's gone. Right? So we are only replanting that which has commercial value. But the mango doesn't follow one path. There's a chapter in this which is called biological casino, bio-casino. The mango tree is a casino. We are all playing there. We think we are the house, and the house always wins. We aren't house. We are one of the players. The house is the invisible hand of ecology. So we have to commit land and commit time to conduct those long-term experiments that take generations to come. We need to get out of this anxiety to make money next season. Mango's not like pomegranate or grapes. 5 years, you're done. Next crop. Mango trees take 6 years to start bearing fruit. Well, 3 to 10 years, depending on the variety. That's called precocity. So we need to take those risks. Are we willing to take those risks? Venu mentioned just now, the 2 words in which I summarize this book is risk and desire. Mango is like the epitome of desire. And desire is meant to get us to take risks that we otherwise won't take. But we live in a time when a baby is born and the parents begin to plan the JEE entrance exams. That's the level of insecurity in which we grow up. So how are we going to take those kind of risks and conduct those experiments across the generations? We'll have to find ways.
Thank you, sir.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answered. So I have one last 2 questions. I will combine with the questions. One was, can you, because I have seen some of the nurseries where we get a lot of seeds which is not quality, if you talk. If I want to grow a mango plant, and some nurseries have not been completely, the plant is not exactly to the proper quality, number one. And how do you identify the seed is 100% quality, and where is exactly in India which is being cultivated nurseries where we can buy the plants?
Now you see how difficult it is to be a mango scientist. It'll take 7 years for the plant to start bearing fruit, and then you will figure out 7 years you have to look after it, and then realize that, oh no, cut it off. This is not what I wanted. There are good nurseries, and while there is no certification for nurseries, they have a reputation. You can find out the best nurseries from the agriculture stations around in your region. Bangalore, by the way, has the best horticulture research institute in the country. I hope there's nobody from Lucknow here, because they've got the other one. But this one is much better. It works much better than the Lucknow one. Lucknow has the Central Institute of Subtropical Horticulture, and Bengaluru has the Indian Institute of Horticultural Research. IIHR is in northwestern parts of Bengaluru. You can get whatever you want over there. And they'll have lists of the best nurseries. But you have to, in the end, you have to trust. The only way to get the right seed is you taste the mango and then you try it. And then wait 7 or 8 years. stunned into silence by the mango.
So while we wait, maybe I'll follow up with one other dimension of the mango, which is not really significant in your book, which is pickles, right? So is there a reason you didn't look at pickles at all, or you just sort of exhausted by the exercise of just looking at all the things that you have considered till now?
I'm really scared of pickles. I like them, but I've known people who are really taken with their pickles, and I'm sitting with one here on the stage. Venu makes his own pickles, right? And he tries to do it exactly like his mother used to make them. Now just imagine, for somebody who's never made a pickle, to get into a conversation with Venu on pickles, right? It'll first require me to go and do a lot of training. Now pickles, mango is a natural product. Pickles, on the other hand, is a very cultural thing, right? And in cultural things, if very much, very much. I know families that have a full room with just pickles, and they are labeled by the year and the season, right? I mean, you think people who like wine are obsessed with it? Try pickles. There are families that are obsessed with their pickles. They take great pride in how the pickles are made in their house. And these things, there's a former colleague of mine who we were having lunch together, and he turned away the yogurt that was served to him. I said, "Why don't you have it?" And he said, "I don't like it." I said, "Why? You don't like curd?" He said, "Oh, I love curd. I don't like this." So I said, "What's wrong?" And then he was kind of shy at that time. He said, "We have good curd in our house." So I said, "Okay, what kind of curd do you have in your house?" He said, "My grandmother was known for her yogurt, and when she was leaving her house in Lahore during the partition, she took a spoonful, tied it up in her chunni, brought it here, and then made yogurt from the same culture." I just sat there. I looked at my watch. I said, 6 o'clock, I want that story. And that story, we published that story. It became great. Other people copied that story and wrote about that story as well. Now just imagine touching something like this. What is the kind of insight that is required to get this kind of information out? I don't have access to it. I'm a Krishi Darshan reporter. Many of you won't remember Krishi Darshan. It used to be this program with which Doordarshan used to open its evening programming. And it used to have these agriculture scientists who used to say, "और आज हम किसान भाइयों को पूसा 201 के बारे में बताने जा रहे हैं." Right? If you want to get a sense of what they were like, read Charles Darwin on barnacles. It's some of the most excruciating text you will encounter. Darwin took years to do he was obsessed with beetles and barnacles. So he'll take 2 pages to write on the dorsal, on the characteristics on the dorsal side of this particular barnacle. Right? Now journalists are really scared of such subjects. And I think pickles are like that, and you know that very well. I'm sure he's plotting this all along. He'll nail me on pickles here. No, it's a very dense area. Somebody needs to do it.
Yeah, it just points to the large terrain that is still to be mapped out, right? That's sort of the sense. He's done a great job by looking at so many of these dimensions and tying it together in his, if I may call, somewhat madcap travels across the country and then looking at all these questions. But certainly there is room for, more interesting.
Most definitely. I love pickles.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It's just that I haven't made them. And I'm really scared of holding conversations with those who have.
So do we have any more? Yeah. So Ajay.
Question, you talked about time.
Maybe you can wait for the mic, please.
So my question is, you talked about tying it all together. After going through the book, which in parts is very dense, this was the question which I had after your extensive travels and tasting so many different type of mangoes. when you sat down to tie it together, I mean, how it happened, tying it all together. There's so much of information, and sometimes it looks you're getting lost in an amrai.
You should see the first draft. Yeah, it's, like I said, I didn't expect to do this. And I hope when you say it's dense, you mean the information and not my writing. Because that's a really, hurtful comment for a journalist. I mean, we get by in being able to get something across. But you're right. And it took a lot of effort to be able to first understand that and then figure out how am I going to write about it. Because I'm not an expert. And if I wrote it like an expert, Venu wouldn't have spared me here right now. Right now he's being appreciative that he's put in a lot of effort. Now suppose I say I am the mango expert and I will tell you this. Right? That's not how journalists work. But when you get a big story, something that is complex, the question is, do you run away? Or you try to do the best you can? In my case, I'd rather go down trying. Maybe this book seems too dense with that material. Somebody will read it, they won't like it, they'll do a better job. Right? And given that it's a mango, maybe that's June this year. Right? So there is always hope. But the question there is, do you run away from the difficulty? Or do you walk into it?
So if you may ask, what was the most challenging bit that you had to figure out for yourself, other than the travel, which we have considered, but in terms of, the other structure that you put together, what bits took you a while to get the hang of?
I'll name 3 things. One, the wider culture of the Amrai. Although I did have access to it from my family elders and other people, finding material for that and understanding that took a lot of time and effort. The reproductive character of the mango can drive a trained botanist up the wall. Now just imagine my trying to figure it out with my second division literature degree. So the only way is that you read something, you don't understand it, then you read it again, then you don't understand it, then you read it again, you don't understand it, then you go to somebody. Then you try to find the person who can explain this to you. Then you understand it, then you go to somebody else and then you figure out that no, you misunderstood it. Right? I've been scolded by scientists. An excellent scientist here at IIHR, M.R. Dinesh, he said, listen, don't get into all this. You're not going to be able to understand this. Right? So I said, okay, just tell me where the source material is. So he said, you mentioned that book. C.P. Iyer has written about this. You'll figure it out. So then I go back and then I read and reread C.P. Iyer on that. Right? And these are lovely scientists. They've spent their lives working on this. But they work in a code that is not accessible. Now, my journalism is about not running away. I'm prepared to fail, but I'm not prepared to run away.
What is the third point?
The third point is okay, let me start with an example. So you're a journalist, you're trying to figure out the mango business. You go to an area that's known for growing mangoes. There are orchards all over. So you stop, you see workers, you go to them and you say, where's the owner? It took me more than 2 years of trying this and failing. After 2 years, I figured out it's the wrong question. The right question is, where is the contractor? Because I'd been to so many orchards and not met the owner. In the end, I'd only meet the contractor. And I'd ask the contractor who owns the land. They were evasive, always. So it takes a long time to figure out that people who own the land don't even visit it. And the contractor does everything. I've met contractors coming out of a brawl, blood coming from their face, hands. I've met contractors who've come to meet me After I got a number, I called up somebody, said, "Acha, wahan aake miliye." And he's come with a gun because he doesn't know who he's going to meet. Right? I've spent the entire day trying to go from place to place, landed up somewhere, and there is no transport to get back. The whole day is lost. Figuring out the land ownership part, the orchard owners, was extremely difficult. It took me, I'll give you an example. Coastal Maharashtra, Konkan region. I don't know Marathi, and I'm not familiar with that region. It's the summer, I'm going on a motorcycle. I meet owner after owner after owner, orchard owner. There is no place to eat. And nobody asks you if you want a glass of water. It's the only part of India where in summer I've gone and not been asked for water. In my days as an agriculture reporter, rural reporter, I've been to really desperately poor households. You go there and they apologize that we can't look after you very well, but please sit, have a glass of water. These were orchard owners with literally, they were worth tens of crores of rupees. I can't tell you, like, after a while you just go and say, "Please, may I have a little water?" Because there's no place, there's no market there. Orchards are in the countryside. So that was the most difficult part. And then people are not willing to open up about land ownership. How I finally managed to crack it is, a Delhi lawyer friend, I was cribbing about not being able to figure this out. And he said, "Listen, I have a friend who's a lawyer and his family owns an orchard in Delhi. And he's a big lawyer." So he called up this fellow. Now, he must have owed him. So he called me up and said, "You needed help? Tell me what." And I said, "This is what I'm understanding. This is what I figure out from my reporting. Can you help me with this? I said, "Okay, give me a few days." He came back to me with land record details, with when land record deals were changed. And then I went back to my notes. And I realized in casual conversations, people had mentioned the years in which the orchard was set up. And it matched. Then I went and asked friends who research land matters. I was surprised. The best book on this is by an Indian origin scholar who lives in America. And that book is not available here. I had to ask a friend, an academic friend in the US, to find that book in a library, photocopy that chapter and send it to me. I'm not a trained academic, so it takes me a lot of time to figure these things out. But that was very difficult. Those three things, I think, along with the scientific information, but the scientific information just requires patience. You read it, then you go to people. It's possible to find people who explain it to you, who will clear up your misunderstanding. So more than anything is just staying with it, but those three things I'd pick out.
I think there's somebody there.
So, hi. So we live today in a globalized and capitalistic world where profits are maximized. So the buildings that we see around us are almost similar, resulting in similar skylines around the world. Also, the food we eat almost is similar wherever we eat. So, yeah. So, my question is how this affects mango, like globalization and capitalism. You almost covered capitalism, but I would like to know on globalization.
Okay. India is currently the third largest exporter of mangoes in the world. And I have a feeling this is because of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, India was the 8th largest. So something dramatic has changed in the international mango market. And suddenly India is exporting more mangoes than it was doing earlier. We don't know how to do it. We're very bad at it. And I don't think it's a bad thing. We don't get enough good mangoes to eat ourselves. So that is a very complex part of the story. What that means is people who are willing to pay the highest amount of money get the best produce. And that is the logic of the market, right? But here's the thing about the mango. It's a question I'm asked very often. Which is the best variety? Which is the best mango you've tasted? And my answer is there in the last sentence of this book, which is a child somewhere is running away with a mango he or she stole from a heap while the caretaker wasn't listening. And it is so good that the person who's paying 1,200 rupees for one mango will never know. Right? The problem here is the mango comes from nature. Agriculture, all horticulture is a risk with nature, is an adventure with nature. The markets that we live in today, they are defined by industrial products. So the problem here is not just capitalism versus something else, a system of ownership. It's also how do we approach our food. We don't even seem to think that it comes from nature. We think it comes from a factory. Because economics gets its basics today from the industrial system. And agriculture will always be second rate, third rate in that pecking order. Farmers will always come last. I've thanked him earlier, but I really wanted to thank Venu for all the help in this, all the help he's provided in this book. He's also reviewed the manuscript and provided detailed comments, which is very difficult to get. There are people who are willing to give comments, but those comments are not worth a lot. And the people who can give good comments are often stressed for time. So I know he took out a lot of his time and invested his understanding and experience into this. And of course, this conversation is so much the better for me that because he's here. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sopan, for that. I'll tell you my special interest. I'm one of many people who had pondered the question of should I write a book on the mango. 25 years ago, I was quite serious about it before I went on to do other things. And I used to tell people that I figured out chapter 3 of my book, which is called Mango Chauvinism, which is basically saying that the mangoes that I know are the best in the country. But I must confess that was a time where it was more enthusiasm than experience and understanding. And I'm really delighted that and very grateful that Sopan has actually given us this understanding of the mango.
On behalf of BIC, I would like to thank Sopan Joshi and Venu Madhav Govindu for bringing the session to BIC. Thank you, audience, for your time and interest. Sopan will be signing the books outside next to the table. Have a good evening.